This is an introductory exploratory discussion on the nature of evil, especially in relation to the modern times and what's going on. My name is John Michael Dumais. I am the creator of the riseupnewhampshire.org website and the author of Challenging the Pandemic Narrative ebook, both of which explore the heterodox and often suppressed scientific information around COVID-19 and the way it's being used to install a technocratic totalitarian agenda known as the Great Reset. I'm a longtime activist, community organizer and writer, a musician, and a healing facilitator. I'm deeply interested in the evolution of humanity and what I call the emergence of self, soul, and society at this unique inflection point in history. And I'm deeply gratified to be joined by three other individuals who I know well and I consider friends and colleagues. Paul Kervick, with whom I've already had a number of great invitation conversations. Gerhard, whom I've known for going on 2 decades and have worked with on a variety of things, and Johanna, Laurie. Both Gerhard and Johanna have their own regular shows on Cheshire TV, and both are partners with me in Rise Up New Hampshire. And on their own are both doing everything they can to educate people, reduce pandemic fear mongering, and help all of us steer our way towards a brighter and freer future. And so with that miniature introduction, I'd like to give the opportunity for each of you to introduce yourselves. And why don't we start with you, Johanna, since you're up on my screen right now.
Okay, well, I'm Johanna Laurie, and I've lived in Keene off and on now for, I'd say, 30 years altogether. I say off and on because I was here for 20 years, went away, and then came back, and another 10 has happened since. I'm a grandmother. I've been involved in the 9/11 Truth Movement. I've been not an active peace movement. This is one of my youngest grandchild, actually. His name is Cameron.
Hi.
And I've been a Waldorf parent, and now I'm a Waldorf grandparent. Cameron goes to the Waldorf school here. And
Mama works at the
and
school.
his mother works at the school. Yeah. So I guess you'd call us stable members of the local community now. So I'm very interested in what goes on here and how this evolving situation we have right now with COVID and other things that are happening are impacting the community, are impacting families, people as individuals. And this discussion is of particular interest to me. My late husband, who died 2 years ago, was very concerned about the growth of evil in the world. Peter Laurie, my husband, was a poet, a writer, a musician, and someone who was just attuned to what was going on. And he said quite some time ago that he felt that evil was on the increase and that we were going to see some pretty bad things happening. And frankly, I'm just as glad that he didn't live to see what's happening now. I think this would have been extremely, extremely discouraging to him. But anyway, so that's my story.
Thank you. And Gerhard, why don't we move on to you?
Well, I've got a very checkered background going back all the way to the Dutch East Indies, Java. And I guess I was born to be an activist because at age 5, I let some birds out of the market there, at the local market where my sister and I were allowed to go unaccompanied and not supervised. And we had figured out that this man had no right to keep birds in there. So I guess that launched me on trying to help or set things right. I have been a Waldorf teacher most of my life, but also worked as a science writer. What drives me to join this group today is the thinking about evil and thinking about the last part of the Lord's Prayer, deliver me from evil. Somehow, I think it's something that comes to us more and more these days. And thinking about what Johanna said about her husband, I believe that I've been extremely aware of the total sequence of major lies Well, I'm going to later on get my denture, but I'll continue without it, with a gap in my teeth, which is also part of me. The bed of lies we have been growing up with since basically the 50s, 60s, the creation of the CIA, the 60s with their assassinations, and on and on. It is no wonder that, to me, there's a direct relation between believing in lies, not really penetrating to the truth, and to evil. And in a way, the rising evil of our time is that most of us have actually no idea what the truth is behind the recent history we're living in. That's enough as an intro for me, I guess.
Yeah, I'm Paul. I'm from Vermont. I'm one of the outsiders from your New Hampshire community. I'm a dad. I'm a grandfather, 7 grandkids, 4 kids between my wife and I. I started up out in Rhode Island as a very well-behaved, good oldest son in a very conservative family, and served in that role pretty much until I was in my early 30s. During Vietnam, I was an officer in the Navy, spent time in Washington, D.C., came back to grad school, undergraduate degrees in business, and I'm an ordained minister, graduate school degrees in counseling and education. And I guess I began to wake up to who I am in this life. Not that I wasn't all of that before. It was very valuable. I learned a lot, some tough lessons. But it was really interested in looking at our social systems in the world. And what I came to experience was that they were all based, all of them, money, education, illness care, legal system, they were all based on separation and control. I'm a big fan of Steiner. I've had many friends in Waldorf school. My wife was goddess of the angels, or the fairy godmother for the Waldorfs for many years. And I really came to see that my path was to look at systems and how I could contribute to a different system. So we started the first birthing center here on the East Coast because they wouldn't let me in the hospital to be at the birth of my child. And then fast forward, I moved to Vermont to raise my kids and set up a nonprofit called Awakening Sanctuary back in '98. We did retreats and education, 2 labyrinths, healing pyramids, vision quests, education centers, straw bale construction. And then I got into elder care. I figured, well, I've done the birth. Now, how about our elders? Because I've been blessed to be able to travel in Egypt and India and different world religions, and how people are treated when they get to be 50, 60, 70 years old was so different. And it felt criminal to me what was happening. And so we started a alternative approach to elder care. I retired from that last year. We ended up with 3 facilities throughout Vermont, holistic, looking at the value of our elders. And it's a time when they should be able to give their gift back to their community, no matter their mental or physical ability. And very simple, not rocket science things we could all agree on: locally grown organic food, structured living water, a sense of purpose, creativity, exercise, movement, dealing with stress. So it kind of fast forwards now to I'm looking at environmental issues right now, structured living water, helping our farmers. I'm looking at our soil health. I'm looking at consciousness. And recently, John Michael and I decided we'd start to do some podcasts about conversations we've been having that tie very much into what you both have shared about what's happening now on the planet, in our culture, in our societies, and how we could be of service to assist in shifting this separation, the fear. So that's kind of where I'm at. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And so let me just make a few introductory comments and then open it up for overall general discussion here. I never anticipated doing a podcast on deconstructing evil. Evil's not something I've talked about or a word that I've used much. Not that I haven't thought about it, but it's not something I've used much until recently. But I think we're at an unprecedented time in history, when many of us are seeing a small group of controlling interests attempt to do a large scale imposition economically, socially, medically on the entire world population. I was raised Catholic. I can remember the term, "Oh, there's a devil on their back," or weird kind of things like that. The sort of the fear of this other potentially controlling evil out there, energy or entity that could lead people astray. Of course, we've had certainly a lot of cultural analogs in Hitler, Lenin, Mao Zedong, others who were, killed large amounts of their population. Very easy to see them as evil. I can remember coming across M. Scott Peck's work and The People of the Lie, and why there seem to be certain people who just can't be in the truth, who always are working for their own best interests, supposedly, perhaps not in the end, but who seem to not be able to deal in good faith with others. Over the course of time, I came to see a lot of what the US does in the terms of economic terrorism, things that are talked about by John Perkins and his Confessions of an Economic Hitman, in terms of our effect on other countries and how we've hollowed out their economies, and the kind of the false flags of Iraq and other places over the course of time that are really for the benefit of a small number of people. I've come to learn about human trafficking and satanic ritual abuse, which are not topics polite company talks about. But there seem to be forces of advantage seeking in our world that deny their impacts on other people. I also think there are dangers in seeing ourselves as all good and those others as evil. And more recently, in the last several years, have come to study the works of Paul Levy and Wetiko, which is the spirit of evil. That particular term comes from Native American tradition, but he has more of late espoused a non-dual or quantum view of Wetiko, feeling that it's also something within us that we need to be aware of, that's trying to teach us. And if we're not seeing it, we're not learning. And if we don't see it, it can lead to great destructive effects. So with that kind of introduction of so-called, I guess I'll turn it over to anyone who wants to jump in. And I think it's the first question I'd ask is, what is the basis of your understanding of good and evil in general? And briefly, maybe what life events have most impacted your view? And how has your understanding changed over time?
I can give a kind of a reaction on the way I personally have, in a very limited way, been aware of evil or worked with evil. And like your friend in Vermont, Rudolf Steiner has been a guide for me. And I've become aware that, yes, all of us actually walk on a narrow, a kind of basically a balancing wire. We're going off one side or the other. And the way I think Steiner points at it is there are kind of two kinds of evil. On one side is more an evil that has to do with materialism and power and money and the obliteration of any insight into higher powers, materialism. And on the other side could be an actually energizing and at times seeming wonderful path in which we get inspired to change the world for the better. And we get carried away by our own words and are actually floating and are not grounding and not necessarily improving the world. So, and I've had recently, just as a guide for this narrow, difficult path of a human being, because to to me, the scaling of the Twin Towers with a high wire, with a balancing wire by this French aerialist or whatever you call him, who, when he saw the plan for the towers that had even been built, felt immediately that he had to somehow scale that. And then his actually doing this, to me, is kind of an inspiration, because by doing it, he also, in an incredible way, totally gave himself over in trusting in higher powers to make it possible. So he hesitantly walked over the first time with that long stick in his arms and made it. But as he gained the confidence that some higher power helped to keep him up there, he then ran across the wire, lay down on the, I mean, he did the most amazing things. What I'm trying to say is that we can easily nowadays, pointing at Bill Gates, the powers that are trying to run the world, and point at evil that way, people who are trying to take power, they should not be allowed to take, not in the human, and for the benefit of the humanity, but in pointing at them, you know, the moment you can do that, I'm obviously better because I know the truth and I see him and he is the bad guy. So yes, we do have the very difficult task to pointing at the fact that there's a great lack of truth in the world, and yet not do this from a point of view where we are the know-it-alls who are setting the others right on their path because they are just mistaken. And in a way, we can recognize on the other side that the great fear of the moment is driving a lot of good people, including people living in this area and doing the local newspaper, actually to the point where they feel they can point at us who ask questions, who may not buy what comes from Washington that way. And they are actually in the position of saying, take this shot. I mean, we have looked at it all. Don't stand in the way for the greater good for the community. You are all just basically down there as second-class citizens who don't see what you should be doing. Their editorials and their opinion pages go in this direction of pointing at us. The four of us, I'm sure, are part of it, as second-class human beings who actually probably should be re-educated. And with time as we woke up and did what needs to be done. So enough said.
I think related to what you said, that as human beings, we have struggled forever with this question of how to balance the good and evil, in the sense of knowing what is, feeling what is the right thing to do versus other things pulling us. You know, think about the Garden of Eden myth and all of this, that somehow among all of the creatures on earth, we're the only one given this great gift of understanding what it is we were doing and why we did it, you know. And to me, the problem today has more to do in a way with our sense of losing our humanity, basically, giving up our humanity, as people seem almost ready to do. This is what in a way astounds me. And maybe it's because they haven't studied history, or they're just not thinking about how we've evolved as human beings. But this is our job. This is our job in this world, to take these difficult questions and be able to actually think about them, talk about them, and then do something. And somehow today, we're at this point where almost as a world, the great mass of people are not, you know, enough people are not looking at that as our primary job, our primary role. They're looking at something else. And so it's very easy for these small groups of elites to kind of lead everybody astray. This has happened before in history, we know that, but it's in a way more insidious now because of the internet, because of how you can reach people, because of the way that you can get everybody scared. I mean, think about this over this past year, it's been mind-boggling how everybody's gotten so scared. But then there are just easier ways to do it. And in a way, maybe we're more complacent now, you know, we're more particularly in this rich country of ours. We're more satisfied with, but the things, but that's the real problem to me, is that we're giving up our humanity. We don't see what we're giving up, and we don't see how it is that if we no longer talk to each other. I mean, this is the thing about the masks. You're somehow not able to actually really have a conversation with anybody anymore. I mean, where's that? That's one of the most basic things about being human. We can look each other in the eye, we can see what we're saying, and we can converse with each other, and then we can come to these. So we had this conversation yesterday, and I just wanted to flip onto this a minute, in which John Michael proposed thinking about what we'd like to be as a society. And that's what we all want, is we have a vision of something that's either been or that we can see as a future that would be good. But when we're in a situation like now, where everything is so pressing, and you have to make all these decisions in the moment, because the person who is opposing this point of view, or saying we need to talk about something else, was saying, yes, but I can't think about that. I haven't got time to think about that because I have to do this. I have to be active. And so, and this to me just pointed up the dilemma we're stuck in right now, that if we're only reactive instead of proactive, we're not going to get anywhere. If we don't actually sit back and talk to each other and figure out a plan, we're not going to get anywhere. And then these forces will run us over, just the way they have in the 20th century, and centuries before. So the question is, how do we get there? And that's what I think, and this is what the good, where there's a discussion of good and evil, if we actually can see that beyond all the differences we have in the moment, there's something that we all agree on, that there's something we really want, and it has to do with our humanity. It has to do with being able to remember that as human beings, we have a special role in this world. Above all the others, we have a job we need to do. We have something that's really important for us to do. Anyway, I'll leave it at that for the moment.
Yeah, some beautiful comments from both Gerhard and Johanna. Thank you. I had a number of inspirations, stories, things to share in response to what's been shared so far. To me, it always was quite interesting that the word evil spelled backwards is live. And I'm looking at the fact that we're in this third dimensional world, which is, I used the example when I was teaching at Burlington College of, if we think of all of us dealing right now in the pandemic, in this level of reality, it's like we're all living in a particular frequency. Say it's a color, pick a color, say the color red. And that's the reality that everyone is immersed in. However, what I know to be true is that's one of many frequencies and colors. And so what you were saying, Johanna, is we are light. We are these heart source beings having a human experience in this color. And so how can we shift that frequency? How can we invite change to move beyond the illusion that things are separate? And fear is a great governor in all of this. I also was reflecting on a time I was in Egypt and had a very profound experience where I had gone through, we were doing rites of passage, each of the temples as a part of my shamanic training with Nikki Scully. And we would take people at different temples and have an experience. And we went through this one, which was the joint temple in Edfu of Sobek and Horus, which is the crocodile. Kind of think of that as evil. And then the hawk, the son of Osiris, was light. And after going through and having this experience, the third eye was opened, and I was walking down a corridor and I saw a hieroglyph and I lost consciousness. I mean, I was still there because people said I was talking, and we went back to our tour boat. We were on a boat going up the Nile, and I laid down, and I guess I was out for about 8 hours. And what happened was I had absolute detailed memory, was being taken out into the desert. And I was by myself, and it was starting to get dark. And I dug a hole in the desert, and I sat there and I began to meditate and just breathed into my heart. I was a little bit frightened. I was just, there's nobody there. Here I am in this foreign place. And it was just as real, it was realer than a dream or anything. This was an actual experience I was having in 3D reality. And as I sat there and breathed into my heart and things began to get dark, I began to disintegrate right down on a molecular level, just disappearing. And it was a little bit freaky. And what then began to happen is I actually became like all the children who've been molested on this planet. I became all of the animals who've suffered because of overhunting or polluting. I became the violence in countries where people were slaughtered. And I felt like I was being devoured and just disintegrating into nothing. And at a certain point, I just took one more breath into my heart. That's all I know how I could do. And there was a spark of light there. And I just brought all of my attention on that. And that began to move out of my heart. And it began to awaken things and lighten up. And about that time, I was in the desert, the sun was coming up, and Thoth, god of wisdom, and Isis, the mother goddess, approached me, and they held this little infant in their hands. And this star, 5-pointed star, came out of my heart and began to spin, went into that child, and that child then came into me, and it became a 6-pointed star, and it entered my being. And I came to about that point. My roommate on the trip was a German doctor, and they were a little concerned because I was convulsing and having all kinds of fever and all of this. But I came back and I was fine. I said, I need to go out and sit on the fresh air and have a good cold Egyptian beer. I don't know what happened, but and Nikki was there, was typing. And what came to me was a story. It was called The Story of the Broken Heart. And it was the function of evil and light in this planet that we've all chosen. We have that within us all to teach us that we aren't separate, that, yeah, at one level, it's very real. But at another level, we've chosen this. We've created this virus. We've created the pollution on the planet. All of us are part of that in some level, conscious or unconscious. And that it's created to separate, to create the evil, which is lived backwards. It's like a mirror existence so that we can wake up. And just to wrap up this, what has come to me over the last couple of years on my own spiritual path was something, because like you were sharing, it's very difficult to, when you're in this group of people and people aren't able to hear or even have a conversation, you know, what do I do? How am I with this? I had to let go of me and trust that I am an eternal source creator being that's here to create. And I remember Emmanuel coming through Pat Rodegast many years ago saying, you know, most of us are living in the mind. And the mind is a great tool, but it's always taking us into the past or into the future. Neither place do we create. And so to me, we create through the heart. So my path is every breath. I do this every single breath as best I can. I die and I'm reborn. And so in that next moment, what am I creating? Am I putting joy into the world? Am I doing something that gives me joy? And when I'm with someone and they are not in that place, I do my best to invite, ask them to consider, would you like more information? But totally unattached to them having to do anything because they're living in their perfect moment right then. And people can wake up at any time. But if we put out the right frequency, the right invitation, that's what we can do to help really transform. And I've been able to create so much more as I've been in that place rather than reacting and feeling I have to go out and take on the government or take on Bush or you know, Biden or whatever. That's all happening. But the more I put my energy there, I'm disempowering my ability to create and to live and not let evil rule. So that's my little contribution.
Thank you. It's
Yes,
very
thank
beautiful
you.
and very helpful. Yes,
Yes, indeed. Thank you. And
yes.
just the live and evil inside out, in and by itself, you started there and you ended there, is worth many meditations. That's was a wonderful experience you shared with us, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So
That's
there's
really at the heart of all the great religions too. So all the great religions really do say that it's to purge yourself of whatever it is that's in your way that you can actually. Just so it's yeah. Mhm.
So there seems to be two ways that we can be looking at this, and I think part of what you were just sharing, Paul, was that it is it is here to teach us whatever we might conceive of as evil, and it might. I sometimes will put evil in air quotes. It's like because it's such a stand-in for different things. Johanna was saying earlier that sometimes even our reactivity can feed back into it, which is a way that we participate maybe unconsciously in it. And certainly I know that I've reacted strongly to things, and I think that can put more fear out into the world. And yet we're all humans. We're also trying to learn. I would love to hear some thoughts about is this what we conceive of evil? Is this internal to all of us? Is there some aspect of it that's external and self-organizing on its own, regardless of what we're doing? And what do we make of the current historical moment where, as I said up top, where it seems like a small cadre of people are attempting to impose a tyrannical, totalitarian not just worldview, but literally world conditions by shutting down economies and imposing medical mandates, or at least attempting to. So does anyone want to pick up that thread there? Is this internal? Is it external? How can we best understand and relate to it so that we're not creating more of what we don't want?
I could jump in briefly here on that. I think it's both internal and outternal because we're in this world and of this world. Which for me, the focus has got to be within the heart. That's where my power lies, and that's my ability to help shift change. And one of the greatest probably teachers I've ever had in life was when we started the birthing center, was working and listening to midwives. I mean, I do feel that we are all midwives right now, those of us that have some awareness and consciousness. And the midwives, they're not going to do a C-section because, it's 3 hours to my golf date, or, the woman is struggling a little bit. They are present, and they're present to things that can be very painful and very fearful. The result is beautiful. It's a birth of a spirit coming into a physical form. And they understand about being present. And so to me, it's how to be present in my life and in the world and respond when there's a reason to respond, but not get caught up in the fear and the drama and the pain, because each person has got their own birthing experience. So to me, it's like we have a whole human race that's going through the birth canal right now, or about to. And so it's how to be present and be in our maximum place of joy, of love, of service. And then when I get angry or I feel sad or something, then I just take a breath and say, you know what? That's part of being human, but that's not me. What is it in me that's angry? What is that? Because it's not the other person. They're not doing it to me. I'm responding or reacting to some energy, frequency. So it's within me to change that. And it may be an old wound, an old trauma I had when I was a young child, or when my dad would beat me. It could be that kind of thing and it's all in us, but it's also happening outside. It's like a mirror. And so we can grow and change from this and help each other with this. That's.
Yeah, I'm inspired by what you just said, Paul, and thinking about the recent time, I sometimes raise question marks on what I have been doing on the level of allowing glimpses of things that are being censored at the moment out as because I do believe there are honest people around who have a half-open mind to seeing that something is going on, that if we are indeed on the right path, could that right path possibly include the increasingly heavy censorship of anything that questions, that actually demands dialogue. So I try, and I will probably keep going on that road, trying to be selfless and true, because the self can get in the way. But when it comes to total inspiration, yeah, you mentioned the midwives. Just recently thinking, actually in the last few years, some of the most heavenly inspirations of love and joy that I have experienced come through the eyes and faces of either babies or extremely young children. I just want to share two of them quickly, abbreviated. One was before COVID, when at the Keen Co-op cafeteria, there was a mother standing with a baby a few months old, maybe 4, 5, 6, in her arm, lying like this. And there is something about a baby that, and I was at the other side of the room looking at this baby, and I wanted to connect with it. And what I did in that full room was I aligned myself, realizing that the child did not see the world the way I.
Yeah.
And so that she picked up my face out of the sea of faces around her, and she gave me the most heavenly smile I've ever had that will never leave me. That was one. And the other one was recently in Walmart, almost abandoned, a 2-year-old with her mother looking for things. And she started waving at me. I appeared at the end of an aisle also looking for, well, I enthusiastically waved back, and then that repeated in another aisle, the two of them again. And again, I walked in at the end. This time she recognized me. Oh, we have met before. And she was just a bundle of hopping energy. And to me, those small moments in a certain way give me a feeling of the essence of why we are here on earth.
Beautiful. That's so beautiful. Thank you, Gerhard. Wow. You know, you keep triggering these little memories and stories. Johanna, I don't want to keep going here, but if you had something you wanted to add in there, but I have a story I'll share too that I think ties in at some point.
Oh, go ahead with your story. Go ahead.
Okay. This is from a lovely man, one of my favorite people on the planet, that my wife and I had the great gift to go and do a weekend retreat workshop with. His name is Greg Braden. And Greg had, sorry, John Michael, Greg had told this story about he was having dinner with a bunch of friends, and they were watching television. And they're sitting around having a drink before dinner. And on the news, and this is back, I guess it was in the 1990s, maybe, when they had those massacres in Rwanda. I don't know if you recall that. It was horrendous. Women, children, people just being slaughtered. And it was on the news. And so Greg was sitting there and just observing people's response to this news story. And if I remember this right, one person, one guy there got really angry and said, you know what? Why don't we just get the planes out there and bomb the crap out of those people? You know, this is unconscionable. We cannot let this happen. We need to go and bomb them. And then another person stood up and said, I just need to turn this off. You know, I can't be around this energy. Let me just turn this off. And then Greg noticed there was a third person there, a woman who got up, and he could see she had tears in her eyes. And she began to leave the room and went out into the kitchen. And Greg stood up and followed her out there. And he said, how you doing? How's things? She said, I don't know what to do. She says, I'm just so, my heart is breaking. She said, killing more people, she doesn't, war has never brought peace, that's not going to help. And, turning it off, and getting in denial, separating, the fear closes things down. That's not really accomplishing anything. He says, I don't know what to do. And he said, well, you've just done it. You've taken the first step. And he calls this the blessing, it's the power of compassion. And he said, the way this works is in your heart, you have compassion for those women and children and young men who are slaughtered. Your heart goes out and embraces them with love and compassion. And you have compassion for those soldiers who maybe, they had been raped and murdered as young kids, and maybe they don't know what they're doing. Maybe they're being threatened if they don't bomb, they're going to do this. But the third most important part of the blessing is you bless yourself to be able to be present and hold all of this from your heart of compassion and just hold it there. Okay, so it's good, it's the evil, it's the being present to hold it in your heart of not knowing. And so as we can do that as community, it may not change in the moment, but energetically, we're actually supporting the love, the good, the living. And if we're called to action, some of us may call to action. I mean, I was in the Navy, but I married a woman whose family were from England and they didn't believe in violence. And I had to sit there in order to be able to marry the daughter. And they say, what would you do if someone broke into your house and was going to kill you? I said, I honestly think I would defend myself and my family. But I don't know, because I've never been in that situation. So I was just honest with them. And here I am in the Navy. I got my uniform on. I don't know what would happen. If someone's going to come at me with a gun, would I take their life? I said, I would think I would defend myself, but I don't know. I mean, that's something. So again, being able to be in the not knowing, but have compassion and be present to what is. So I don't know if that helps at all.
Thank you.
Yes, I hear you, but the original question is the evil both in us and outside of us? And I think if we look squarely at the fact that both things are true, and they say that there's a small percentage of any population that has no compassion whatsoever and will never have. And that's very hard for those of us who want to be a compassionate person to even wrap our minds around, that there are people who will never, ever be compassionate. And if those people are actually the ones who are running the show, if those people get power, then those people are very, very dangerous indeed, because there is no particular way that you can then, as a person, I mean, you can approach this with all of the goodness in your heart that you absolutely got, but bad things are still going to happen. And then the question is, you need to be ready in your own mind and in your own heart as to how you're going to respond in situations like that. I mean, what I see now is that people are grappling with these really, really difficult questions. My hairdresser has said to me twice in recent visits to her, well, I have to be ready to die if I need to for what I believe in. And I've heard that. I hear what she's saying, because it does come to that in certain circumstances. As you say, you may not know in the moment what you are going to do, but in a sense, in your being, you have to be ready for whatever you're going to be asked to do or what you're going to. And that's a fear that, I mean, those of us who are not fear of the COVID, we still have that fear inside of ourselves, because it's such an unknown, and because, as you say, we haven't been there yet. So, but I kind of think that that's the place that we're actually being asked to be in right now, with ourselves and with other people. so that we are in some way ready for whatever comes our way. And I guess the other problem that I have a bit with with the beautiful picture that you paint about being ready in your heart and how that in a sense will take care of everything, which I'm I'm not sure that it takes care of everything. Because I feel like that action on some level is necessary. You talked about being called to action.
Mhm.
And I think we are. I think all of us in, each in our individual ways are called to action at certain times. And then we have to be ready to take up the call to action. And in the call to action, we have to hope that we are doing the right thing. I should say the right thing for us. We have to hope that that's going to actually be the way that we're going to go with that. And I think that, as I say, I feel like it's a quantum leap almost in consciousness that's being asked of us right now.
Yeah.
And somehow this is the thing about consciousness, you go along time and nothing happens. And then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose, and that's what's kind of going on now, And I think as a nation, we've had that as well, because you think about it, we talk about the great generation who went through the Second World War and how they were all ready for this because it was coming at them daily, hourly, by the minute. And they all reacted in the ways that they had to. But since then, because we've been in a period of relatively affluence, and actually more and more so, we very, very few of us have actually had, unless we've been involved in wars overseas, which those people have had to deal with these questions, but most of us have not. So I think this is coming as a great kind of awakening now to a lot of people, that all of a sudden, there you are. You're going to have to make the really important decisions. You're going to have to really think hard. You're going to have to really pull on all the resources you have inside of you to be able to deal with what's happening. So that's my take on it. Go ahead.
I'd like to mention one thought that might still fit today. Do we have 2:00 as a deadline, John Michael?
We can go over a few minutes, so go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead and make
Well, it seems to me possible, and it hasn't been said before today, to identify one element in which evil has become visible, and actually we would have people that we otherwise disagree with on COVID and all kinds of other things would agree with us on that is not being identified. And I believe it is actually an manifestation of evil. Namely, I don't think in the history of the world it has been possible for a few people to amass as much power and money as has been allowed, with it. Capitalism allowed, there's always people who will earn more than others and deserve maybe more than others and work for it, and that's fine. People did not mind giving up part of that capital to support the community. We have now come to a point, and it has gone through the last year even more so. The billionaires are basically becoming ever richer, and the rest of us poorer and being attacked. I think there's just something objective there about evil. The fact that it has been allowed somehow has slipped in. I like to point at as a manifestation of evil because it's a large part of where we are. And if we actually all agreed that that is the main thing, then people who are otherwise disagreeing might be able to move forward, because there is that power in such a few hands is evil.
Yeah.
And I don't know that actually in any other period of history,
Right.
People have had that kind of control worldwide.
Exactly.
There have been individual tyrants in various places that have done all kinds of damage, and people hated them, and then they were dead, and that was the end of them. But now it's the fact that somehow it's global. Everything is global. So all the evil is global too.
And that is the opportunity, because it is global.
Yeah.
That there are many, many, many more people now have the opportunity to wake up and to recognize what's happened. And that is happening like wildfire across all the countries. And we only get, if you just sit and watch the evening news, you're not going to see that. But we know thousands of people that are saying, oh my goodness. And the fact is that pyramid, the few at the top, they have no power unless we give it to them.
Exactly.
This is
yes.
right.
That's
so
what we have to realize. They don't actually, we have the power. But if we've given up our power, if we just roll over, then it's 1984 coming.
And I invite us all to consider that we are so much more powerful than I think we give ourselves credit for or could even imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And death is the big fear. Once you've overcome that, what can they do? Mm-hmm. So getting together like this, putting the words we're speaking are having an impact around the world. That frequency, because we're bioelectric beings. Mm-hmm. We go back to that original thing. We are white light. We are source, infinite, eternal. But if we're caught up in only the frequency of me is red and what can I do and good and bad, then it keeps us in the duality. So you are able to affect mammoth change in this world. If I'm a little pebble and you throw me in the pond, what happens? I touch every part of that pond and shore. That's who we are and what we're capable of here. And that's what we're doing today. We're making a big difference by putting this out. So thank you, John Michael, and all of you.
So yeah, we've got a few more minutes here, and I just wanted to maybe get some perspective on what Steiner says about evil. Gerhard, something you said earlier, I think was part of that. He looks at it. There's two aspects. I guess he talks about, does either, I know both of Johanna and Gerhard are more students of this than I am. Does either of you want to just weigh in a little bit on, on what he says, the two different aspects and how they're playing out right now, if you can see that clearly? If not, just a little bit of education on what he said about it would be good.
Well, I wish I were deeper into this than I am, but basically the path on the tightrope, and there's two sides that you could fall into. The materialistic side, which in a way is what we're seeing and taking over the world at the moment, because is the Ahrimanic side is and the getting carried away in lofty thoughts and ideals that are not grounded somehow on the other side can make us feel awfully good and worthy, but there is an illusion in that, and that is called the Luciferic side. But those are just words, and I wish I had enough insight into this to deepen that. I think Paul is probably able to say as much or more about it. I'm sure with his, because he has looked at this too. But that's all I have to offer.
The Buddhist teachers I know of have all said that you are the guru. And when I think about it, that's what Christ is saying too. I mean, I feel if you go back to your own religious roots, whatever they are, and really look at that, you can pull a great deal of strength for yourself from that in terms of how to deal with the current crisis. Because this is really, this is a crisis of belief. This is a crisis that has to do with much more than any of the other things that we're worried about. And if you actually could make some peace within yourself as to what is important to you, what's most important to you, then I think that this contact that you can make with other people from a place in the heart will actually bear some fruit, and that we do have immense power. I mean, this is what the great religions teach us as well, that this is what the human gift is. We're very powerful beings, and we can either use it in a good way or we can use it in a bad way. So
I would share one further, just a little quick story that within family members and some dear friends who were so upset by vaccines and masks, that we're not wearing masks, that they were getting angry and really upset with us. And And my wife has worked in the body-mind awareness field for most of her life, and myself as well as a counselor and as a minister. And what we were able to do, again, through the power of just being in compassion and love in our hearts, is help get folks to a place where we could agree to disagree. So they were fine, we were fine, but the love connection was there. So it keeps the door open to be able to perhaps another conversation, share some more information. It's a process, but it's respecting that they're exactly where they are. And I have to love and appreciate where they are, even though it's not my reality and I have compassion, I want to be helpful. So if that could be of any use, if you can work with folks, or when you're in a situation that's very, if we could just agree to disagree, because you're my friend, you're my neighbor, I care about you, and together we have to help this world be a better place.
Yeah. I like I go back to the birthing metaphor that you used earlier, Paul, and I really like that. And I think there's something in that for us. I think that can help us now, because there is this, at one level, you could look at the evil, so-called, as a contractive force, right? And I can imagine that when the contractions start, the baby, if there's thought there, might think this is the end. The walls are closing in. And it is the end, obviously, of that existence, and not quite yet, not quite yet the other existence. So we are in this tunnel, and there's the life inside of us that's pushing forth, and then there's the compression, and maybe there's definitely a cycle of that, or a continuous repetitive nature of, it compresses, it pushes in and
Cracks.
pushed out a little bit further. We relax, and I've often said of depression that those who are depressed feel this heavy weight on their chest usually, and you wouldn't feel a weight on your chest unless there was something equally alive pushing up within you. It's the current or momentary illusion that thing that we believe is pushing down on us is stronger than we are, that keeps us in the depression, and not so much the conditions themselves. Now, we can certainly over a long period of time convince ourselves of that. But and those of us who've been through dark night and shadow work, and continue to go through, I'm not saying it's over, but feel that there's something to be learned and something to be gained from that. But I would like to say we are in unique times. I don't think we've ever quite seen this. Gerhard, I hope you don't mind my mentioning that you lived in the Netherlands for 5 years under Nazi occupation.
Oh, wow.
And so have a unique perspective on what it might be like to have that totalitarian
Huge
compression coming at you. And I know that's part of what motivates you now. And this is even bigger than that, because it is of an apparent force coming down on all of us. But I keep wondering, and I keep thinking, hey, the latest thing, everyone needs the vaccine, or now 2 masks might work better, or how about 3? And I keep thinking, and I think maybe I'll just make this comment and get some final comments from you all. I kind of feel like these are, and I think I've said this to some people, these are opportunities. It's like, the puppeteers going, I wonder how much we can get away with, or we're trying to wake them up and they're not awake yet. They're not quite, they're not fighting back enough yet. And so let's do things that are even crazier, even more outlandish, and inspiring people to wake up. And yet at the same time, even agreeing with what Paul says, I think people in other countries seem to be pushing back more, and we're not necessarily hearing about it from the normal mainstream sources. But where is the pushback in the United States exactly? There's, admittedly, about half the people are saying they don't want to take the COVID vaccine and probably are not going to. But where exactly are we here in the United States with this wake-up call? And how can we communicate what we're feeling most effectively to other people? Maybe not talking about good and evil is maybe not putting it in those terms is better, because that can be very triggering for people. At the same time, we're seeing what we see. So any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm thinking that what I'm trying to do around here is a little bit of civil disobedience, in the sense that I'm walking around without my mask. I'm smiling at everybody who comes my way. And I feel, and to the extent that I can reach people just through a look and glance, through a hello, how are you? It's very helpful right now, because I see so much fear and unhappiness out there. And I think with friends and people with whom you disagree, that you really care about, you listening. I'm finding more that it really doesn't help to get in these arguments, as Paul has said. It doesn't help to have the binary thing going back and forth. It's much more helpful to make a joke, or to have just to lighten up somehow, and then to listen a lot, and to help people feel held, because there is just so much fear out there. So that's what I'm thinking. But in terms of community, we haven't got to that discussion with what we can try. I mean, I want very much to start a conversation in the Waldorf community. I feel like this is a problem that we have right now, that the Waldorf community is a microcosm of what's going on in the country and the world, and people aren't talking to each other enough. And I really want to see if I can get that going. So
Beautiful.
This was a good session. Thank you, John Michael.
I appreciate you all joining me, and I suspect we only touched the very tip of the iceberg here. And I want to just share one final thing. When I quote unquote broke quarantine back in April and visited a couple of friends of mine nearby, and I didn't know where they stood on germs or what have you. So I stood out in their driveway and honked my horn, and waited for them to come out, and they're like, "Come on in, give us a hug." It was a really wonderful way of just taking a chance on love, I guess, taking a chance on light. I know it's not always going to work out that way, but it's interesting to find resonance in places where you're not always looking forward, and to reconfirm or reaffirm our common humanity for those of us who are looking beyond the fear, and recognizing that there are many of our friends who are still buying into the other narrative, and it's their, as Paul was saying, that's where they are. They're and I'm not saying I'm completely beyond fear myself, but one of the an image that came to me that night when I visited my friends, this is back in April, the thought that came was, we're in the final battle of love versus fear. And I've written and talked about this with some of you. And I had an image of us all standing on a disc, but we were on it was like, so it's like you have this here and there was a disc over here. So the disc could, right, there was a fulcrum point here, and there was a bunch of people who were going to stand on the other side and believe what they were going to believe about the pandemic, and others of us who were going to stand maybe closer to the center of the fulcrum and maybe on the other side. And the guidance that came was, we're here to balance fear with love, and which is not, as I understood that now and continue to understand it, it's not making the other side wrong. It's not trying to battle them down, though I will admit to getting into that at other times, as I work through the duality of the situation. But to really, I think, be in our truth, speak our truth as best we can, not back down, not weaken our own resolve, yet on the other hand, not to polarize against the other side as being bad or wrong or less than in any way. That's where they are. And can we, because this disc, I think, wants to rise. I think it's going to take us all someplace, but not if we're staying in the 3D world of polarization. So I'm not saying that's an easy thing, but I'm going to just offer that as maybe a meditative image of where we can rise together if we don't fall into the trap. That's very easy, the Wetiko trap of seeing those other people as being wrong, as being bad, while at the same time we may find ourselves working through levels of duality with them as our days and our moments unfold. So it's a very interesting, fascinating, and not always very easy time to be in. But I know from my discussions with you all that it's a great time for awakening. So thanks for being here with me today.
One footnote to you. You started off with the hug that your friends were inviting you to. And I think there's just a great message in there. My day has already been made because I had a big hug this morning from the mother of a child that I'm helping. And yes, so let's not forget that with all the social distancing and things we're told, hugs are still the absolute essence of human relations. And thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, and I'm sending out virtual hugs that we try to do with all those that we don't get to hug. And just one final thing from me, which was when I honestly look at my life and I go back to all the challenges, the hurts, the wounds, the trauma, I can honestly say that I have grown more and become more of who I am today because of that experience. And so I'm seeing that as an optimistic view for humanity, that we are going to grow, this world will grow from this experience, and we each just have to do our part.
All right.
Blessings.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, John Michael. Thanks for hosting.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for taking part, and I'll look forward to our next conversation.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right.